Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision.
Right.
It's like engineering. You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at the film and says, "There it is."
Yeah, it's completely binary. Like, it's either broken or it's not.
Exactly.
And I think it's comforting because we naturally crave things that are visible. Things that can be neatly categorized and just immediately fixed.
But then you step into the world of human nutrition and chronic illness, and suddenly that X-ray machine is it's totally useless.
Oh, completely. It's a completely different ballgame.
We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky, especially when we start looking at the staggering statistics surrounding what is arguably the single most important biological compound for the human body.
Which is saying a lot.
It is, because over 90% of the population has suboptimal levels of a nutrient that literally controls 10% of our entire genetic code.
Wow. Yeah, when you really pause to consider the weight of that statistic, it sets the stage for the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Right.
Because if something controls 1/10 of your genetics and 9 out of 10 people walking down the street don't have enough of it,
Right.
well, the symptoms aren't going to look like a clean break on an X-ray.
No, not at all.
They're going to look like a systemic, confusing, just body-wide breakdown.
Exactly. And that is our mission for you today. In this deep dive, we are going to completely dismantle everything you thought you knew about vitamin D.
We really are.
We're going to explore why chronic vitamin D3 deficiency has become this, silent global epidemic. We'll look at the bizarre ways your body is probably begging for it right now.
And there are some truly bizarre ones.
Oh, totally. And perhaps more provocatively, we're going to look at the global repercussions of this deficiency. Like, who actually benefits financially from keeping the entire population completely in the dark?
Yeah, we've got a phenomenal collection of medical analysis and health education to pull from today.
We really do.
We're heavily featuring the clinical insights of Dr. Eric Berg, alongside data on a really revolutionary autoimmune treatment out of Brazil. It's called the Coimbra Protocol.
Fascinating stuff.
But before we get into the hidden and honestly shocking mathematical errors in our national health guidelines, we have to establish a foundational truth.
Okay.
Vitamin D is not actually a vitamin.
Okay, let's unpack this right away, because right out of the gate, that corrects a massive misconception I had.
Yeah, the name itself is basically a historical accident. A vitamin, by definition, is an essential nutrient that your body cannot produce on its own.
Right, you have to acquire it through your diet.
Exactly. Think about vitamin C. Humans lack the enzyme to synthesize it, so we literally must eat citrus or other plants.
We'd get scurvy otherwise.
Right. But vitamin D doesn't fit that biological profile at all. It is actually a fat-soluble steroid hormone.
A hormone. So we're talking about a chemical messenger, much closer to, testosterone, estrogen, or cortisol.
Precisely. And the way your body creates it is brilliantly simple, yet biologically profound.
How so?
Well, when your skin is exposed to the ultraviolet B rays of the sun, it triggers a reaction. The skin takes cholesterol. Yes, the very cholesterol we've spent decades being told to fear.
Oh, don't even get me started on the cholesterol thing.
I know, right? But the skin takes it and uses it as the foundational building block to synthesize this powerful hormone.
That's wild.
And once it's activated, it doesn't just float around providing basic nutrition. It travels right to the nucleus of the cell and literally alters genetic expression.
Wait, really? It tells your DNA what to do?
It tells your DNA what to do, yes.
Okay, so we're talking about a hormone synthesized from sunlight and cholesterol that commands 1/10 of our DNA.
That's the reality.
And if 90% of us are lacking it, what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis?
That's a mess.
I bet. Because your daily complaints, the things you just chalk up to, getting older or working too much or being stressed out, those might actually be a massive hidden hormone deficiency.
Yeah, and to understand the symptoms, you first have to understand the reach of this hormone. Receptors for vitamin D, specifically the VDR, the vitamin D receptor, they exist in almost every single cell and tissue type in the human body.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. The brain, the heart, the immune system, the gut, the prostate, the breast tissue, the muscles, the bones.
Yeah.
They all have these physical docking stations just waiting for vitamin D to arrive and give operating instructions.
Which totally explains the sheer variety of things that go wrong when it's missing. Let's start with the common ones. The indicators most people might actually associate with a lack of sunlight.
Sure.
We're talking bone loss, obviously.
Right.
Bone pain, a lowered immune system where you seem to catch every single cold that sweeps through the office, and depression.
The classics, yeah.
But another major one is high blood pressure. And I was fascinated to learn that vitamin D acts as a natural ACE inhibitor. How does that mechanism actually work?
Well, if you look at standard pharmaceutical treatments for hypertension, ACE inhibitors are a very common first-line class of medications.
Right. My grandfather takes one of those.
Lots of people do. ACE stands for angiotensin-converting enzyme. Basically, this enzyme constricts your blood vessels, which drives your blood pressure up.
Like squeezing a garden hose.
Exactly. ACE inhibitors block that enzyme, allowing the vessels to relax. Well, it turns out vitamin D performs this exact same physiological function natively. Naturally. It acts as a negative endocrine regulator on the renin-angiotensin system.
So it just naturally relaxes the blood vessels.
It does. If you're deeply deficient, your arteries experience what cardiologists call arterial stiffness.
That sounds bad.
It is. The smooth muscle cells and the vascular walls literally cannot relax. So there is a massive documented correlation between populations with low vitamin D and just skyrocketing rates of essential hypertension.
That makes total sense.
Hmm.
But here is where the clinical data completely blew my mind. The list of like bizarre symptoms.
Oh, yeah. These are wild.
These are the things you would never ever connect to a lack of sunlight or a hormone deficiency.
What's on your list?
Let me run through a few of these because I guarantee someone listening to us right now is dealing with at least one. First up, procrastinating.
Cognitive stalling, yeah.
Also, head sweating, especially in infants, but adults too. Waking up with a soaking wet pillow even if the room is perfectly cool.
Right.
Nightmares. Restless leg syndrome. Adult acne. Unexplained panic attacks. And this one's crazy. A constant difficulty feeling satisfied after eating.
Yeah, and if we connect these back to the underlying biology, the mechanisms are incredible. Take that inability to feel satisfied after a meal.
Because you always just think that's a lack of willpower. Right?
Exactly, but it's often biochemical.
Hmm.
Vitamin D is directly involved in the maintenance and function of the beta cells in your pancreas.
Okay, those are the cells that manufacture and release insulin.
That's right. When you are low in vitamin D, those beta cells dysfunction. Your systemic insulin resistance goes up.
And what happens then?
Well, when you become insulin resistant, your cells aren't absorbing the glucose from your food properly. Because the cells are starving, your blood sugars get chaotic, and your brain never receives the proper hormonal signal leptin telling it that you are actually full.
Oh, wow. So you keep eating because your cells are crying out for energy they physically can't absorb.
Exactly. It's a cruel trick of the body.
Okay, what about the psychological symptoms? The procrastinating, the panic attacks, the nightmares. Like, how does sunlight affect my dreams?
It comes down to neurotransmitter synthesis.
Okay.
Vitamin D is biologically required to convert an essential amino acid called tryptophan into serotonin.
Right, serotonin, the happy chemical.
Yeah, it's the crucial neurotransmitter that regulates your mood, your executive function, your sense of well-being, and ultimately your sleep cycles, because serotonin is the precursor to melatonin.
Oh, wow, wait. So if I don't have the D3, I don't make the serotonin, which means I literally don't make the melatonin.
Right. If you lack the steroid hormone required to run that chemical assembly line, you don't just get generalized depression, you get erratic brain states.
Like what?
Well, the lack of serotonin in the prefrontal cortex leads to executive dysfunction, and that manifests as chronic procrastination. You simply lack the neurochemical drive to initiate tasks.
I feel attacked right now.
Furthermore, a depleted serotonin system leaves the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, hyperreactive.
Is that where the panic attacks come in?
Yes, this is exactly why you experience sudden panic attacks. The brain has lost its chemical shock absorbers, and during sleep, this neurochemical imbalance throws off your REM cycles,
Leading to incredibly vivid, distressing nightmares.
Precisely.
That is just wild. It's a total domino effect. And the physical symptoms are just as strange. What about the head sweating?
Head sweating, particularly in infants, is actually one of the earliest classical clinical signs of rickets, which is severe vitamin D deficiency.
Wait, really? Head sweating is a sign of rickets?
Yeah, it relates to sympathetic nervous system overactivity. When the body is fundamentally lacking this hormone, it perceives a state of physiological stress.
Like it's under attack.
Exactly. It triggers a mild chronic fight or flight response, which overstimulates the sweat glands, predominantly on the head and neck, especially during sleep when the body should be downregulating.
And what about restless leg syndrome? My mom actually suffers from that.
That links back to dopamine pathways in the basal ganglia of the brain. Those pathways require vitamin D for proper receptor function.
So the receptors just degrade.
Yeah, when they degrade due to deficiency, the motor control signals to the legs become erratic. That causes that uncontrollable urge to move.
We're seeing a body that is fundamentally struggling to operate its most basic biological software.
That's a great way to phrase it.
And it extends into the reproductive and structural systems, too. Like, the clinical data shows a woman is over 13 times more likely to experience irregular menstrual cycles if she is deficient.
And urinary incontinence is 3 times more likely.
Wait, incontinence? How does a hormone affect that?
It's a fascinating mechanical failure. The pelvic floor muscles, like all muscles, require calcium to contract, but they require vitamin D to properly utilize that calcium.
Oh.
Without it, the muscle just loses its tone and structural integrity.
It's also strongly linked to erectile dysfunction in men, again, due to that vascular stiffness we talked about earlier.
Right, the lack of vasodilation.
And in children, it's not just about bow-legged rickets anymore. We are talking about severe structural developmental issues. Things like scoliosis, flat feet, and maxillary bone malformations.
The jaw.
Yeah, the jaw literally doesn't form correctly, resulting in severe overbites or underbites because the bone lacks the hormonal instruction to build out its proper density and shape.
What all of this paints is a picture of systemic frailty.
Which brings up a really compelling way to look at this. Let's think about agriculture for a second.
Okay.
There's something called the BRICS test used by farmers. Have you heard of this?
Oh yeah, the sugar content test.
Oh, right. You take a plant or a piece of fruit, squeeze out a drop of sap, and test it to determine its BRICS score. It's essentially a measure of the plant's internal health, its sugar content, and its nutrient density. If a healthy plant scores above a 12 on this scale, something almost magical happens. Insects won't attack it.
Really? They just ignore it.
Pests literally ignore the plant. They only go after the dying, decaying, weakened crops.
Wow. The brilliant illustration of natural selection at the microscopic level.
Exactly. So if
Yeah.
we map that onto the human immune system, are we just spending all of our medical resources blaming the insects?
That's a huge question.
We are so obsessed with the viruses, the bacteria, the pathogens, but maybe we're completely ignoring the internal health of our own soil.
What's fascinating here is how well that maps.
If 90% of us are walking around with a low brick score, so to speak, because our vitamin D is depleted, well, no wonder the insects are eating us alive.
That analogy perfectly captures the flaw in modern allopathic medicine. We have designed a healthcare infrastructure that predominantly treats the indicators, the weeds,
Yeah.
the pests.
Yes, if you have high blood pressure, you don't get your vascular soil fixed. You get an ACE inhibitor pill that forcibly relaxes the vessel.
Right.
If you have chronic inflammation, you get a synthetic corticosteroid. But the pharmaceutical treatment only lasts 24 hours. The next day, the weed grows back and you have to consume the chemical all over again.
And treating only the indicators guarantees a lifelong subscription to the treatment. You never actually heal the underlying soil.
You're just mowing over the weed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier that vitamin D is a steroid hormone. In the human body, it acts as one of the most powerful natural anti-inflammatories in existence.
Really? Like a prescription steroid?
It behaves mechanically very similar to a synthetic steroid like prednisone. It suppresses systemic inflammation, but it does so without the devastating side effects of destroying your bone density or ravaging your liver. If your body is constantly inflamed, your cellular soil is weak. Your immune system is distracted, and you become the perfect, permanent host for those pathological insects.
Okay, so if vitamin D is this critical, if it is the literal foundation of our cellular health, our neurotransmitters, our vascular flexibility, and our immune defense, why on earth are our official government-sanctioned daily recommended allowances so incredibly low?
That is the pivotal question.
It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. And answering it takes us from the biological reality of the hormone into a realm of staggering historical miscalculation and bureaucratic inertia.
Okay, to understand why the official recommendations are so thoroughly broken, we really have to look at how the body actually utilizes vitamin D, because it doesn't just have one pathway. It operates two entirely different physiological systems.
Correct. The human body utilizes this hormone in two distinct parallel systems. The first system is the classical one.
The one we all learn about in school.
Right. It's the one every medical student is taught, and it's the system responsible for bone health and calcium regulation in the blood.
The system that prevents rickets.
Exactly. We call this the endocrine system of vitamin D.
Okay.
For this system to work, the inactive vitamin D you get from sunlight or a supplement has to travel a really long route.
Where does it go?
It goes to your liver, where it is converted into something called calcidiol. Then it travels down to your kidneys, where it is converted again into its fully active functional form called calcitriol.
So liver, then kidneys.
Yes. The kidneys then release it into the bloodstream to manage your calcium levels. Now, the crucial defining detail here is that this specific bone and kidney system requires a very small amount of raw material.
How small?
It only needs about 600 to 800 international units, or IUs, of vitamin D per day to function perfectly.
And 600 IU just happens to be the official recommended daily allowance for adults.
It is. The entire global medical guideline is built around ensuring your kidneys have enough vitamin D to keep your bones from going soft.
But that singular focus completely ignores the existence of the second system.
Entirely ignores it.
And this is where the terminology gets really important. We're talking about the autocrine and paracrine systems. Let's define those for everyone listening, because this is the absolute game changer.
Okay, so in biology, the endocrine system we just discussed means a hormone is created in one organ, like the kidney, and sent through the blood to act on distant parts of the body.
Right.
Autocrine means a cell pulls in the raw material and activates the hormone internally to use on itself. Paracrine means a cell activates the hormone to use on its immediate neighbors.
So wait, no liver, no kidneys involved.
Nope. The individual cells are doing the conversion themselves.
Wow. And this localized autocrine and paracrine system is vast. Like, which cells do this?
Well, your immune cells do, particularly the T helper cells and macrophages, which dictate your body's ability to fight off viruses and regulate autoimmune responses.
Okay, what else?
The tissue in your brain, your breast tissue, your colon, your prostate. All of these vital organs have the unique ability to pull the inactive raw vitamin D straight out of the bloodstream, bypass the kidneys entirely, and activate it locally, right on the spot.
Why do they do that? Why not just use the kidney stuff?
Because they need it on demand for cellular defense. They use it locally to induce apoptosis, which is programmed cell death in mutating cancer cells.
Oh, wow. So they use it to fight cancer.
Yes. They use it to regulate local inflammation.
Yeah.
They use it to stop the immune system from attacking the body's own tissues.
But there's a catch to this localized defense grid, isn't there?
A massive biological catch.
What is it?
This cellular autocrine system operates on a totally different scale than the bone system.
Yeah.
Because it is widespread across trillions of cells, it requires a significantly higher concentration of raw vitamin D circulating in the blood to operate.
Like how much higher?
To fully fuel this systemic immune and tissue defense grid, the human body needs roughly 8,000 to 10,000 IUs daily.
Wait. So the official medical recommendation of 600 IUs is only feeding the bone system.
Exactly.
It's providing just enough to stop our skeletons from collapsing, but it is leaving the entire cellular immune system, the brain, and the cancer defense grid completely starved of fuel.
That is exactly what the clinical data suggests, yes.
Let's walk through the math on this, because when I saw the numbers laid out in the research, it was genuinely shocking.
It's pretty damning.
We measure vitamin D levels in the blood in nanograms per milliliter, or NGML.
Right.
And the general consensus among functional medicine researchers is that an optimal disease-fighting blood concentration of vitamin D is between 40 and 60 NGML.
Yes, that's the target range for optimal autocrine function.
Okay. And if a person goes to their standard doctor and their blood test comes back at 20 NGML, they're clinically diagnosed as deficient.
Very deficient. At 20 NGML, the autocrine system is essentially offline.
Right. Now, an average-sized adult human has roughly 5 liters of blood circulating in their body.
Okay, stick with me on the math here.
I am. If you take that deeply deficient blood concentration of 20 NGML and you do the chemical conversion to figure out how many international units are physically floating in those 5 liters of blood, that deficient person naturally holds about 4,000 IUs of vitamin D in their bloodstream at any given moment.
Let me emphasize that for you listening. A person who is clinically severely deficient is currently holding 4,000 IUs in their blood.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If a deficient person naturally holds 4,000 IUs in their blood right now, how on earth can the official recommended daily allowance be only 600 IUs?
It defies logic.
It completely does. If you take 600 IUs a day, your body burns through it just running basic daily metabolic functions. You aren't adding anything to the reservoir.
Not at all.
It's literally like trying to fill a 10,000-gallon swimming pool using a shot glass. The math just flat out contradicts biological reality. To achieve the optimal blood concentration of 40 to 60 NGML, the daily intake would mathematically have to be around 8,000 to 10,000 IUs.
And you aren't the only one who realized this equation was broken.
Thank goodness.
In 2014, a group of independent researchers finally dug into the raw statistical data that the Institute of Medicine used decades ago to establish that 600 IU recommendation.
And what did they find in the data? Let me guess.
They discovered a fundamental, massive mathematical error in the statistical analysis. A literal miscalculation in plotting the standard deviation of human requirements.
You have to be kidding me. A typo.
Essentially, yes, a statistical flaw. And when the researchers properly recalculated the original data set, correcting the math, they found that humans actually need almost exactly what you just estimated.
So what was the real number?
The corrected math showed a requirement of 8,895 IUs a day, not 600.
8,895 IUs. Almost 15 times the officially recommended amount.
Yes. And following this discovery, other independent groups of biostatisticians and researchers subsequently reviewed the work.
And
they confirmed it. The foundational math used to set global health policy was undeniably, provably wrong.
So obviously, when this 2014 study came out proving a massive mathematical error, the Institute of Medicine held a press conference, apologized to the public, and updated the guidelines immediately to save millions of lives.
I wish. No, they didn't.
They didn't do anything.
They ignored it. The established medical authorities reviewed the findings and stubbornly maintained the 600 IU recommendation.
On what grounds?
Insisting that it was sufficient for bone health, which, as we know, completely ignores the existence of the immune and autocrine systems.
Which brings us to the multi-billion-dollar question of this deep dive.
Yeah.
If top scientific authorities, institutional bodies, and policymakers know the recommendation is built on a mathematical error, and they know it's only a fraction of what the human immune system actually needs to fight off chronic disease and cancer, why wouldn't they correct it?
And this is where we must transition from biology into the intersection of public health and global economics.
It gets dark here.
It does. The clinical analyses we're reviewing draw heavily from perspectives like Gavin de Becker's investigations into what he calls forbidden facts. It forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. Who are these medical institutes actually protecting?
And I want to pause here for a moment. Gavin de Becker makes a highly provocative argument regarding the pharmaceutical industry's profit motives. And just to be clear for you listening, we're impartially reporting this. We're not saying this is a confirmed mustache-twirling conspiracy happening in a smoke-filled room.
Right, we're just looking at the economic incentives.
Exactly. But if you strictly follow the economics of global healthcare, his theory presents a fascinating and frankly chilling perspective on why these outdated guidelines remain entrenched.
If we follow the money, the data points a direct finger at massive multinational industries that generate unimaginable profits from managing the symptoms of chronic disease rather than curing the root causes.
Let's look at the oncology sector, the cancer industry.
We mentioned earlier that therapeutic doses of vitamin D have potent documented anti-cancer and anti-tumor benefits.
Right, the apoptosis.
Yes. The localized paracrine system uses vitamin D in breast, colon, and prostate tissue to actively suppress tumor angiogenesis.
Angiogenesis, that's the process where tumors grow their own blood supply, right?
Exactly. Vitamin D stops that. It induces programmed cell death in mutating cells.
And the global cancer drug industry generates over $300 billion in revenue annually.
Exactly. So from a purely economic standpoint, a cheap, widely available, unpatentable hormone that is naturally synthesized from sunlight poses a direct existential financial threat to a $300 billion industry.
Because you can't patent the sun.
You cannot patent sunlight. You cannot patent a basic biological compound that has existed since humans walked the earth. Therefore, there is zero financial incentive for pharmaceutical companies to fund the massive multi-million-dollar double-blind clinical trials that would be legally required to officially overturn the established medical dogma.
And it's not just the cancer sector. The clinical data highlights something happening right now in South America called the Coimbra Protocol. Tell me about Dr. Coimbra.
Dr. Cicero Coimbra is a highly respected clinical neurologist out of Brazil. He has spent years utilizing extremely high, heavily monitored doses of vitamin D, sometimes prescribing 50,000 to 100,000 IUs a day to treat patients suffering from severe autoimmune diseases.
Wait, 100,000 IUs a day?
Under strict medical supervision, yes.
Yeah.
And we are talking about debilitating conditions like multiple sclerosis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and psoriasis.
Let's define an autoimmune condition really quickly. It's essentially the body's immune system attacking its own healthy tissues because it's confused, right?
That's a great summary. It is systemic rogue inflammation. The immune system has these specific agents called T regulatory cells.
Okay.
Their entire job is to differentiate between self and non-self. When they function properly, they attack the virus but leave your joints and myelin sheaths alone. When they fail, you develop an autoimmune disease.
And what regulates those T regulatory cells?
Vitamin D, it is the master control switch.
Oh, wow.
Under the Coimbra protocol, these massive therapeutic doses of vitamin D flood the autocrine system, acting as a powerful natural immunosuppressant and anti-inflammatory. It essentially reboots the T regulatory cells, turning off the rogue inflammation.
And does it work?
In thousands of reported clinical cases, it has effectively halted and even reversed the progression of these devastating diseases.
But, and here's the economic reality, fixing an autoimmune disease permanently threatens another massive pillar of the pharmaceutical sector.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the drugs currently used to treat these conditions, biologics, synthetic immunosuppressants, monoclonal antibodies, they're some of the most expensive medications on the planet. They often cost patients and insurance companies tens of thousands of dollars every single month for the rest of the patient's life.
So if we synthesize this economic argument, by keeping the global recommended allowance officially set at a microscopic 600 IUs, the medical establishment achieves a highly profitable equilibrium.
It's the perfect balance for them.
They ensure that the population is technically sufficient regarding bone health, preventing the visual embarrassment of a rickets epidemic. But simultaneously, they ensure the population remains functionally perpetually deficient in their cellular, disease-fighting autocrine systems.
It's the perfect self-sustaining business model. Keeping the global population at 20 or 30 ngm/ml guarantees a steady, lifelong, incredibly reliable supply of patients suffering from high blood pressure, crippling depression, insulin resistance, autoimmune flares, and immune suppression.
You never cure the soil.
No, you never cure the soil. You just sell the population a daily subscription to chemical weed killers. When you lay the flawed mathematics of the 2014 study next to the profit margins of chronic disease management, the global repercussions of this simple deficiency are staggering.
It really forces you to look at modern medicine and our societal health metrics through an entirely different lens.
Okay, so let's bring this down to the individual. Someone is listening to this right now, maybe driving in their car or walking the dog, and they are completely convinced.
I hope so.
They say, fine, the system is rigged. I'm not going to rely on the pharmaceutical model. I'm going to take my health into my own hands. I'm just going to go outside and get my vitamin D from nature, the way humans did for hundreds of thousands of years.
Sounds logical.
But here is where the clinical reality hits us.
Yeah.
Even if you want to fix this naturally, the modern world has built a literal physical barrier between us and this hormone.
Yes, the hurdles to natural synthesis in the modern era are immense. And it begins with a massive psychological shift in public health messaging that occurred primarily in the 1980s.
Sun phobia.
Precisely. Starting in the 80s, society became absolutely terrified of the sun, driven by intense dermatological campaigns to prevent skin cancer.
Right, slip, slop, slap.
Exactly. We started slathering ourselves in high SPF chemical sunscreens, wearing UV protective clothing, and spending the vast, overwhelming majority of our lives indoors under artificial blue light.
But there's an incredible irony in the data here, something epidemiologists call the melanoma paradox.
It is one of the most striking statistical anomalies in modern dermatology.
How does it work?
Over the last 4 decades, the global use of sunscreen has skyrocketed exponentially, and our overall unprotected exposure to the sun has plummeted.
Okay.
Logically, if the sun was the primary direct cause of this specific cancer, the rates should have dropped dramatically. Yet the rates of melanoma, the most aggressive and dangerous form of skin cancer, have continued to rise steadily.
Wait, how is that mathematically possible if we're all out of the sun?
The clinical data suggests that vitamin D actually provides a powerful protective element against melanoma.
Wait, the sun protects you from skin cancer?
The hormone synthesized from the sun does, yes. The autocrine system in the skin cells uses the hormone to guard against mutation. By blocking the sun entirely with SPF 50, we successfully blocked sunburns, but we also blocked our body's ability to produce the very hormone that protects the cellular DNA from mutating.
So just going outside is complicated by decades of psychological conditioning. But what about our diet? Can't I just eat more salmon or drink a few glasses of fortified milk?
Unfortunately, no. You cannot realistically eat your way out of a vitamin D deficiency if you are trying to satisfy the demands of the autocrine system. The concentrations in food are just too low.
Even in fish?
Even in fish. And modern industrial food production has made it significantly worse. For example, fish is heavily touted as a great source. But today, a huge portion of the market is farm-raised fish.
Oh, right.
Because these fish are raised in dense artificial environments and fed unnatural diets, a farm-raised salmon contains about 4 times less vitamin D than a wild-caught salmon.
4 times less.
Yes, the same applies to livestock. Animals raised in indoor confinement operations out of the sunlight lack the vitamin in their fat stores.
Okay, so diet is out. But let's say I'm committed. I strip down, skip the sunscreen, go and stand in the sun for an hour. There's still a massive list of biological and environmental blockers that literally stop the hormone from synthesizing or functioning. Let's run through these because I guarantee almost everyone listening is affected by at least one.
First is skin pigmentation. Melanin is the pigment that gives skin its color, and it is an evolutionary marvel. It acts as a natural, built-in sunscreen to protect against severe UV radiation near the equator.
Right.
But it is highly effective. The darker your skin, the more melanin you have, which means your skin blocks the UV rays required for synthesis. A person with very dark skin may require up to 6 times more sun exposure to synthesize the same amount of vitamin D as someone with very pale skin.
6 times?
Yes. In a modern indoor environment, darker skin populations are at a severe systemic disadvantage for vitamin D production.
Age is another major blocker, right?
Yeah. Yes. As we age, our skin physically thins, and the concentration of the cholesterol precursor required for the reaction diminishes. An elderly person simply cannot synthesize the hormone as efficiently as a 20-year-old, even with the exact same sun exposure.
And then we have geographical latitude.
That's a huge one. If you live north of Atlanta, Georgia, the physical angle of the sun during the winter months is too low. The UV rays bounce off the atmosphere. You could stand outside naked in a snowstorm at noon, and your body will produce 0 vitamin D.
0. That's depressing. But then we get into the internal metabolic blockers. And this is where the modern lifestyle really traps us. Obesity is a massive factor.
Because vitamin D is a fat-soluble hormone, it loves lipid tissue. If a person has a high percentage of subcutaneous body fat, the fat acts like a giant sponge.
It just absorbs it all.
Yes. As the skin makes the vitamin D, the fat cells absorb it and trap it. It gets locked in the adipose tissue and cannot circulate efficiently in the bloodstream to reach the immune system or the brain.
And tied directly to obesity is insulin resistance, which we mentioned earlier. This physically blocks the hormone at the cellular level.
It's like putting duct tape over a keyhole.
Exactly. The hormone is circulating in the blood, it arrives at the cell, but the receptor is blunted by the insulin resistance. It can't get inside to do its job.
We also have to consider pure genetics. It is currently estimated that roughly 30% of the general population has a genetic mutation, a polymorphism, in their vitamin D receptors, the VDR.
So even if they get enough sun, their body won't use it.
Right. Even if their blood levels are optimal, their individual cells physically struggle to bind and utilize the hormone. They inherently require a higher blood concentration just to overcome the genetic resistance.
And lastly, gut damage. Because it's a fat-soluble vitamin, you require bile from your liver and gallbladder to break it down and absorb it in your intestines. If you are one of the millions of people who have had their gallbladder surgically removed, or if your gut lining is inflamed from a poor diet, processed seed oils, or repeated rounds of antibiotics, you simply won't absorb the supplement when you swallow it.
When you look at this gauntlet of blockers, sun phobia, chemical sunscreens, indoor lifestyles, depleted food, melanin, latitude, aging, obesity, insulin resistance, genetic mutations, and damaged microbiomes, you begin to fully comprehend why 90% of the population is deficient.
Yeah, the modern environment is actively, relentlessly working against our biology.
It really is.
Okay, so the listener is tracking with us. They were thinking, fine, food won't work. The sun isn't enough because it's winter. I work in a cubicle, and my receptors might be blocked anyway. I clearly need to take a supplement, and I need to take the 10,000 IUs that the autocrine system demands.
Makes sense.
But right here is where the ultimate, deeply ingrained pushback question arises. It's the fear that has been drilled into us by well-meaning physicians for decades. If I start taking 10,000 IUs a day, won't I overdose? My doctor explicitly warned me that vitamin D toxicity will destroy my kidneys and give me massive kidney stones.
It is a very common, very terrifying, and very valid concern based on the prevailing medical narrative, but we absolutely must separate the myth of toxicity from the actual biochemical reality of what is happening in the body.
So let's debunk the toxicity myth right now.
Okay. Actual acute biological vitamin D toxicity, a condition called hypervitaminosis D, is incredibly remarkably rare.
How rare? Like, how much would I have to take?
To reach a true, dangerous, toxic level of this hormone in your blood, the clinical research indicates you would have to consume absurd, massive doses. We are talking in the realm of 100,000 to 200,000 IUs every single day, continuously, for many months or even years.
Wow. Okay, so taking 10,000 IUs a day is physiologically not going to push an adult into acute toxicity.
Not even close.
But wait. People DO experience severe negative symptoms when they start taking high doses of vitamin D. That's a documented fact. They do get kidney stones.
Yeah.
They do get calcified arteries and joint pain. So if it isn't the vitamin D itself acting as a poison, what is actually happening?
The devastating symptoms that people casually label as vitamin D toxicity are almost entirely caused by a secondary condition called hypercalcemia.
Too much calcium floating in the blood.
Exactly. Remember the very first system we talked about, the bone system.
Yeah.
Vitamin D's primary initial job is to dramatically increase the absorption of dietary calcium from your intestinal tract into your bloodstream. And it is incredibly effective at this. It increases calcium absorption by a factor of 20.
20 times more calcium rushing into the blood. That is a massive influx.
Yes. But here's the critical flaw in taking high doses of D3 alone. Vitamin D's job ends at the bloodstream. It brings the calcium through the gut wall, but it does not tell the calcium where to go next.
Wow.
If you are taking high doses of vitamin D, you are flooding your vascular system with calcium. If that calcium just sits there, it becomes dangerous. It precipitates. It eventually deposits in your soft tissues.
And that's where the problems start.
Big problems. If it deposits in your kidneys, it forms painful stones. If it deposits in your arteries, it creates calcified plaque and cardiovascular stiffness. If it deposits in your joints, it causes severe arthritic pain.
It's pulling the raw materials, but taking them to the wrong address.
Yeah.
Wait, this makes perfect sense. Think about it like a construction site.
Okay, I like analogies.
Vitamin D is the dump truck. It goes down to the gut, loads up a massive pile of bricks, the calcium, and drives it right into the bloodstream. But if there's no one there to direct the delivery, the dump truck driver just gets lazy and dumps the massive pile of bricks right in the middle of the highway.
Yes.
That's your arteries clogging up. That's the kidney stones forming. We are missing the site foreman.
That is an absolutely brilliant analogy. Taking vitamin D in isolation is running a fleet of dump trucks with no management. The hormone requires its mandatory biological partners, its cofactors, to function safely. And the ultimate site foreman, the most critical cofactor of all, is vitamin K2.
Vitamin K2 is the calcium traffic cop.
Precisely. Vitamin K2 is the site foreman who meets the dump truck. K2's biological job is to activate two highly specific proteins in the body: osteocalcin and matrix glass protein MGP.
What do those proteins do?
When K2 activates these proteins, they act like a biological magnet. They literally sweep through the bloodstream, bind to the free-floating calcium, and drive it directly into the bone matrix and the teeth where it belongs.
Wow.
At the same time, the matrix glass protein actively prevents the calcium from binding to the soft tissue of your arteries. Without K2, the highway gets clogged. With K2, you build dense, strong bones, and you keep your vascular highway completely clear.
So K2 is arguably just as important as the D3. But where do we get K2? Because I feel like I see vitamin C and B12 everywhere, but nobody talks about vitamin K2.
And there is a deeply ironic, historically tragic reason for that. Vitamin K2 is a fat-soluble vitamin. In the human diet, it is primarily found in the exact foods that the modern medical and dietary establishments have aggressively told society to fear and avoid for the last 50 years.
Let me guess. Dietary fat. Animal fat.
Animal fat specifically. High-quality grass-fed butter, ghee, egg yolks, certain hard-fermented cheeses, and organ meats like goose liver. It is also found in incredibly high, potent amounts in a traditional Japanese fermented soybean dish called natto.
So by adopting these heavily processed low-fat diets to supposedly save our hearts, we actually cut out the exact nutrient required to keep calcium from calcifying our arteries and causing heart disease.
Exactly.
We engineered our own cardiovascular crisis.
It is arguably one of the most devastating dietary missteps of the 20th century. Furthermore, your body does have a backup system. It can synthesize a small amount of vitamin K2 internally, converting it from vitamin K1, which is found in leafy green vegetables.
That's good.
But it cannot do this alone. It relies on a specific beneficial microbe in the gut microbiome called Bacillus subtilis to perform the conversion.
But let's look at the modern environment again. I'm assuming we've managed to destroy that microbe too.
We have absolutely decimated it. Bacillus subtilis is an incredibly fragile bacteria. It is highly susceptible to the modern chemical landscape. It is wiped out by broad-spectrum antibiotics, which are prescribed constantly.
Right.
It is destroyed by proton pump inhibitors, which millions take for acid reflux. And it is severely disrupted by glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, the herbicide used extensively on genetically modified crops worldwide.
It's everywhere.
It is. Currently, gastroenterologists estimate that only about 30% of the modern population even has a viable colony of this specific microbe left in their gut.
So we actively avoid the animal fats that naturally contain K2, and through chemicals and antibiotics, we've destroyed the internal gut factory that could manufacture it. No wonder high doses of vitamin D alone cause people so much pain and calcification. The dump trucks are running 204/7 and all the foremen have been fired.
Exactly. But K2 is only half of the required cofactor equation. We also must discuss the magnesium drain.
Right. If K2 is the foreman, what is magnesium? Because the clinical data heavily emphasizes that vitamin D cannot work without magnesium.
If D3 is the truck and K2 is the foreman, magnesium is the fuel for the factory. It is an absolute enzymatic energy requirement.
How does it fuel it?
When the inactive vitamin D from a supplement hits your liver and kidneys to be converted into the active form, the specific enzymes responsible for that chemical conversion require magnesium molecules to operate.
Okay.
When you start taking high therapeutic doses of vitamin D3, you put your body's conversion machinery into overdrive. That machinery rapidly, aggressively consumes your stored magnesium.
So if you aren't actively supplementing or eating a ton of magnesium, the vitamin D supplement literally drains your body's reserves dry.
Yes. And magnesium is the master relaxation mineral of the body. It is responsible for relaxing muscle fibers, calming the nervous system, and regulating electrical impulses in the heart.
So without it, things get chaotic.
Very chaotic. If you deplete your magnesium by taking high-dose D3, you start experiencing severe heart palpitations, terrible muscle cramps in your calves, insomnia, and crippling anxiety.
Wow.
And what do? They run to their doctor, complain of these symptoms, and the doctor mistakenly blames it on vitamin D toxicity.
When in reality, it has nothing to do with vitamin D toxicity. It's just a severe D3-induced magnesium deficiency. The engine ran out of oil.
Precisely. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the cofactors.
Okay, this has been an incredible eye-opening journey. We have diagnosed the scale of the global epidemic. We've exposed the flawed mathematics and the staggering financial motives keeping the medical guidelines artificially low.
Yes, we cover a lot of ground.
We've mapped out the physical and environmental roadblocks to natural sunlight absorption, and we've completely debunked the toxicity myth by revealing the absolute necessity of the missing cofactors, K2 and magnesium.
We have established the biological why and the how. Now we must provide the what.
Exactly. So the system is rigged, and our environment is working against us. If a listener wants to fix their levels tomorrow, safely, without calcifying their arteries or inducing a panic attack from low magnesium, what is the exact biological order of operations? How do they safely execute this blueprint?
It begins with establishing what clinical researchers refer to as the golden ratio.
The golden ratio, I love that.
Because of the dangers of hypercalcemia, you must never take high-dose vitamin D3 in isolation. The fundamental rule is, for every 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 you consume daily, you must pair it with 100 micrograms of natural vitamin K2.
10,000 IUs of D3 to 100 milligrams of K2. But there are different types of K2 on the shelf. The data is very specific about which one works.
Yes, you must look closely at the label. There is an MK4 version of K2, which is often synthetic. It has a very short biological half-life, meaning it clears out of your bloodstream in a matter of hours.
Which isn't great if the calcium is still circulating.
Exactly. The version you want is MK7. The MK7 version is naturally derived, usually extracted from the fermented natto we mentioned earlier, and it stays active in your bloodstream for up to 72 hours.
That's way better.
This long half-life ensures that the traffic cop is always on duty, 247, to direct the massive influx of calcium.
So 10,000 IUs of D3 paired with 100 milligrams of MK7K2. That is the foundational pillar. But we also need to address the magnesium drain and the dietary support.
Right. To supply the massive amount of magnesium required for the enzymatic conversion, the clinical protocol strongly suggests consuming at least 7 cups of high-quality leafy green vegetables every single day.
7 cups? That's a lot of salad.
It is, but the chlorophyll in leafy greens has a magnesium atom at its absolute center. This naturally provides the elemental magnesium required, alongside vital trace minerals like zinc and vitamin B6, which also act as minor cofactors to support the cellular absorption of D3.
7 cups of greens a day. That is a serious commitment. It's a massive mixing bowl, not a tiny side salad. And what about hydration? With all this calcium moving around, how do we protect the kidneys?
Because you are actively manipulating and managing high levels of calcium in the blood, you must ensure your kidneys can flush any excess metabolic waste safely. The protocol requires drinking a minimum of 2.5 liters of fluid per day.
Okay, 2.5 liters.
This keeps the urine highly diluted, which mathematically prevents the specific crystallization process that forms calcium oxalate kidney stones.
And paradoxically, when you're running a high-dose D3 protocol, you should actually stop taking extra calcium supplements, right?
Absolutely. Stop the calcium pills immediately, because the 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 is already multiplying your calcium absorption from your normal food by 20. Taking a highly concentrated calcium supplement on top of that is dangerously overwhelming the system.
That makes total sense.
You should also be mindful to avoid excessive daily consumption of highly concentrated dairy foods like massive blocks of heavy cheese during this protocol.
Let the D3 pull the required calcium from a normal, healthy diet, and let the K2 pull it into the bones. It's an elegant, perfectly balanced biological system, as long as you provide all the necessary parts.
That's the key.
But here is the final logistical question. How do you know if it's working? If the standard medical establishment is still operating on the outdated 600 IU, 20 NGML logic, how do I actually test this without my doctor telling me I'm crazy?
That is a crucial point. Relying solely on a standard physician's interpretation of a metabolic panel can be incredibly frustrating.
Because they're using the old numbers.
Exactly. The reference ranges printed on standard lab results often still indicate that 20 or 30 NGML is sufficient. Instead, the clinical experts recommend taking the power back by utilizing an at-home blood spot test.
Like the Omega Quant test mentioned in the clinical data.
Yes. The technology is fantastic. It involves a simple prick of the finger at your kitchen table. You place a single drop of blood on a medically treated card, let it dry, and mail it directly to a specialized laboratory.
And you don't need a doctor's slip for that.
No, it completely bypasses the need for a doctor's prescription. It uses highly accurate accurate mass spectrometry, and it allows you to privately, personally track your exact blood concentration.
That's empowering.
Your goal, regardless of what the outdated, mathematically flawed guidelines say, is to push that blood concentration steadily up into the optimal autocrine range of 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter.
And the data notes that for some individuals dealing with severe, entrenched autoimmune or chronic inflammatory issues, functional medicine practitioners might push that optimal range even slightly higher, towards 70 or 80 ng/ml, but that should always be closely monitored.
The overarching key here is that you are taking control of the metrics. You are measuring the actual operational reality of your cellular defense grid rather than blindly accepting a baseline that does nothing more than prevent your shins from bowing.
So as we zoom out to summarize this incredibly deep dive, we are looking at a massive, almost incomprehensible disconnect in modern society. On one hand, we have the sheer historical reality of human biology. We are a species that evolved outside, bathed in sunlight, synthesizing massive amounts of a steroid hormone that commands 10% of our genetics.
We were built for the sun.
Right. And on the other hand, we have the reality we have constructed today, a mathematically flawed, indoor, heavily medicated society where 90% of people are completely starved of this fundamental biological software.
And as we've explored today, rectifying the single deficiency, bringing the global population safely up to an optimal 40 to 60 ng/ml with the proper cofactors would drastically reduce systemic body-wide inflammation.
It really would.
It would fortify the autocrine immune system against cancer cell mutation, and it possesses the documented potential to reverse devastating autoimmune conditions.
Which, if we follow the money to its logical conclusion, would fundamentally threaten the business models of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies. Curing the soil completely ruins the trillion-dollar market for the weed killer.
We want to remind you, the listener, that clinical knowledge is only truly valuable when it is understood and applied. Understanding the intricate microscopic dance between vitamin D3, the calcium traffic hop vitamin K2, and the energetic fuel of magnesium hands the power of health directly back to you as an individual.
It's true autonomy.
It provides a real biological exit ramp from the endless, exhausting cycle of treating mere indicators.
It gives you the blueprint to fix the X-ray machine, to stop looking at the blurry, murky diagnostic waters of chronic fatigue, random inflammation, and bizarre symptoms, and start actually rebuilding the foundation of your cellular health.
Which leaves us with a final, rather profound question to consider regarding the nature of medicine itself.
Exactly. I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. If a simple, unpatentable molecule created freely by sunlight hitting the cholesterol in your skin can actively control 10% of your genetics, manage your immune system, and potentially guard against our most highly profitable modern diseases, what other sunlight-level basic truths of human biology have we been subtly trained to fear simply because they cannot be patented and sold to us in a plastic bottle?